I think. All right, we got to start.
Come on,
with Horizon.
Terry.
We got to start
You're the
there.
captain.
Todd.
Okay.
Todd, tell us about Horizon.
Okay, Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1, directed by Kevin Costner. Okay, there are a bunch of storylines going on here. It's 1859 in the Old West. There's this supposed paradise city called Horizon, which it's posted on flyers that are throughout the land, and everyone's looking to get there. We start in the San Pedro Valley near Horizon, and a town of settlers find it and eventually get overrun by the Native Americans trying to protect their land. There are 2 survivors. One is a lady played by Santa Miller and her daughter, and they have this connection with this army lieutenant played by Sam Worthington. Then there's also a group of Apaches that are plotting to rid their land of the white people by any means necessary, and it was led by the guy played by Owen Crow Shu, and he's in conflict with another older member of the tribe over his efforts to do such. And they're a group of hunters trying to make their coin getting Apache scalps. And there's also in the Montana territory, there's these 2 violent brothers who are tracking down their father's mistress and their baby, which also features our star Hayes Ellison, played by Kevin Costner. And he's trying to protect a woman and her child, or no, just a child, I guess, after a shootout. And then there's the Kansas territory where there's a wagon train led by Luke Wilson's character. There's a bunch going on. I could go 20 minutes and not really get to all the characters, but we're going to have 12 hours eventually to do this, to get them all fleshed out. This is only the first 3 hours of this saga. And the movie is just really impressive. The costumes and the sets are immaculate. The score by Oscar-nominated composer of 80 for Brady, John Debney. His Oscar nomination was for The Passion of the Christ. I think it's astonishing.
Not for 80 for Brady.
No, not for 80 for Brady. I think it's the front runner for the Oscar this year. It's an amazing score. And to be honest, The Passion might be the closest relative to this in how it's being treated by critics and audiences, or at least the audiences that are going to see the movie. But in general, the reception is kind of the same. It's not going to be a juggernaut with awards or anything, but you'd be lying if you didn't say it was technically and artistically kind of a beautiful movie. And this is sort of Costner's full scope of the American West, or at least it's the setup to that. The How the West Was Won is his inspiration for making Westerns, evidently. And it's a huge undertaking to the point that they kind of had to stall the 3rd and 4th chapters to wait for these movies to come out to fund the rest of the project. But I think getting to know the territories and the customs and the characters is intriguing, even if it's not necessarily traditionally entertaining. And the acting is good by a lot of people. Costner does his thing. I really like Jenna Malone. Young William Miller is in this, and he's really funny in his couple of scenes. Will Patton, of course, and Old Crow Shoe is quite good. Now, here's the thing with this movie. I don't know how this should have actually been released. I wrote down a bunch of things that this is sort of or could be but I would argue that there's no real good way to release this. It's long enough to be a TV show, or at least a miniseries. And in the last 35 years, that's probably the best route for it. Since Lonesome Dove, really, which this isn't really Lonesome Dove, it's more like Broken Trail. THC is coming, evidently, in the next movie, or the 3rd movie or something. But some other things that this is sort of you have Lord of the Rings, where it has a fallback of being based on books, so it had to break it up. But the first movie is all set up. There's 3+ hours of the characters walking to where the movie is going to happen, and then it ends. And then we had to wait a year for the next one to happen. I don't know if that would have worked for this. We had the Dragon Tattoo movies, the original ones. They all were released kind of at the same time. And the awards fate was impacted by it. That was around the same time as the Red Riding Saga. Wasn't going to work like that. The Nymphomaniac and Kill Bill are one movie, which this is sort of one big saga, split into multiple parts, released at different times. Neither were awards players. We have The Best of Youth and Carlos, which are 6-hour movies that were overlooked by everybody, but were also released on TV. And in addition to the theatrical run, that was never going to work for Costner's thing. We have Avatar, which was a big thing. And then 4 more chapters were announced. Everyone's "Oh, what are you doing, James Cameron?" The same way we're doing with Kevin Costner, except the second one kicked ass too. But it's not that big of a box office thing, so it's never going to be approved for that. But the one that is most similar is Che, which was the Steven Soderbergh biopic about Che Guevara. It was a 6-hour or 4-hour and a half movie, split into 2. And it was one was clearly better than the other, but again, nobody really knew what to do with it because it was 2 parts of the same movie that were just released at different times. the problem with Horizon is that the box office for this one needs to be good in order to fund the other ones, in order for make the second one even make sense to do. The same issue happened with Alita Battle Angel, where they just kind of like scrapped it after the first one. It's difficult to qualify for awards also when you have multiple movies in the same year because they can't be grouped together and they're going to be in competition against each other. What I would have done is like release one in November and then release one in like March or something to like keep the awards hope alive, but to also like keep the conversation going and all the possibilities are there. Anyway, with Horizon, I think it's good. The good parts are like pretty great. The weaker parts are like still watchable. So it's in a Western, so you kind of know what you're getting. I think that the fact that it even at its most mediocre, it still gets over the hump for me. So I'm giving like a reluctant 3 stars, but I am really looking forward to seeing what happens next because I'm not really a fan of the whole like leading into the greatness. But it does end in a weird thing where it has like a trailer for the next like 3 movies or something, or at least the next movie, which is the same thing Furiosa did. But these movies haven't even been released yet. Like Furiosa did it that way worse. But yeah, I'm going 3 stars for this one. But I will absolutely be watching the second one and whenever it comes, like August, whenever it comes out. First day I'll be there.
All right, Zach. Where are you at?
All right, so, I did not want to see this movie. I mean, this was number 2 on Todd's list. I've been chastising him for a while. I have no idea why this appealed. I guess the closest thing to interest for me going into the movie, because I like unconventional Westerns. I like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and I like The Harder They Fall and like Lone Star. I'm down with that shit. But traditional Westerns, I'm not a fan of. It is interesting that Kevin Costner has staked so much of like his own personal kind of reputation and money on the movie. And I guess there's some stuff with him in Yellowstone. I guess he left Yellowstone in order to make this movie, which kind of just feels like a retread of Yellowstone. The audience I was in the theater, I was surprised how many people were there. I'm not surprised how old they were, though. It seemed like they were the Yellowstone crowd, so to speak, but they seemed to dig it. I'll start on the part of the spacecraft that's good. I gotta say, I was not horribly bored by the movie. It is 3 hours, but I gotta say it went by. I only checked my watch a couple times. I think it's due in part to the fact that there are so many characters in it that the movie never lingers on one scene longer than like 2 minutes. And that's maybe the best and the worst part of the movie because as a result, consequently, we're not really able to get to know the people very well. We kind of get sketches, outlines about who they are. And maybe that's intentional because by all means, this is a part 1. So we don't really know a whole lot of backstory. And then there's parts that are just confusing. Like there's a part where a little Apache boy randomly speaks perfect English. Why? I don't know. The whole Abby Lee story was really hard to understand, like what exactly was happening, why she was watching the kid. But I think that's by design. I think maybe there's probably more like elaboration on that in part 2 or part 3. There's a scene with Chinese people in it. I had no idea what they were doing there. But again, this is what makes this movie so hard to review. And Todd kind of touched on it. Like you can't. It's the first installment. And so maybe what is lacking in terms of narrative coherence gets amended later on in the series. So I think we just take different approaches to it. I'm grading the movie for the 3 hours and 1 minute that I watched. And I got to say, I thought it was pretty lame. I didn't think that there were a whole lot of new ideas about the West that were presented in this movie. I thought a lot of the characters were kind of stereotypes of Western like archetypes. Like we have many damsels in distress. We have many gunslingers. We have the mysterious, Kevin Costner. I don't even know really what he's doing in the movie, but he's a force for good at some point. Him and Abby Lee have, I think, the worst sex scene in 2024. Even worse than Nicolas Cage's sex scene in Dream Scenario. I will make a point about Todd's point about the music. I thought the music was terrible in this movie. The music is really in your face, okay? And it's like, again, if you like the How the West Was Won type big Western in scope, you probably are going to like this movie more than I did. It's a throwback to when Westerns were very direct and there wasn't a whole lot of complexity in them. There's actually a character who says a line late in the movie that I wrote down. He says, "Let's get out of here before this gets complicated." I kind of felt that way about the movie. I really didn't like the way that the native characters were portrayed in the movie. I will say the most interesting characters in the movie were Piancene and Talik Shim, his brother. And I don't know why they couldn't have had their own more developed plot line. Maybe they're more in part 2 or part 3, but I thought those scenes about the differences of opinion in the Apache tribe about how to deal with the presence, the onslaught of these Western settlers was by far the most interesting part of the movie. Unfortunately, the Apache, I think, get villainized in this movie in very reductive ways. Whenever they appear on screen, you hear the negative strings. And I just think we're in 2024. Come on, Kevin Costner, okay? You made a great movie about Native American and white interaction. And that movie was about compassion and intellectual curiosity. And this movie, I think, really reduces the non-white character. So I didn't like that at all. And I just kind of feel like this is it. I mean, this is really like the grand Western that he wants to present. Again, maybe there's more later on in the movie, but I don't think this is necessarily great cinema. I wasn't even really that impressed with the cinematography. It's kind of flat looking. It's clearly shot on digital, and there's not like a whole lot of, like, you remember Dances with Wolves has that great like buffalo chase sequence. There's amazing visual sequences in this. There's not one sequence in this movie that I really thought, that's pretty cool. Now, I guess when the natives burn down the village in the beginning, which again, we've seen a million times in movies, okay, fine. It's a cool sequence or whatever. I did like the scene where Kevin Costner was accosted by the guy who was after Abby Lee, and then he shoots him. That approached interest. But on a whole, this movie was like the TV show Heartland. I think I've texted Terry about the show Heartland, but it's a show that my father-in-law watches, and whenever I'm with my father-in-law. It's a show about a horse ranch in Canada, and it's very like TV. You know, we're there with the in-laws. There's not a whole lot to do. You put it on the TV, you put it on the Heartland network or whatever. It's passable. It's entertaining. It's not complex. It doesn't challenge you. This movie is kind of the same way. It's 2 stars. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. I will concede that to Todd, but I wish that Kevin Costner, who did make a great Western at one point, could have come up with more challenging and provocative characters and insights, as opposed to, I think, a lot of this stuff, which is sort of a retread.
All right. Yeah, I'm kind of with Zach on this, but in some different ways. I think the technical side of it is amazing. It looks great. I think it sounds great. It all comes down to how he's making this. This is like Todd said, this is a 3-hour exposition, and everything, there's way too much going on. There's so much going on. There's so many stories he's trying to tell that you get a bunch of half-baked characters and you don't know enough about any of them. And there's holes in the plot that don't make any sense, that just kind of are left there. The third billed person in the movie is Giovanni Ribisi, and you see him for 5 seconds at the end of the trailer, at the end of the movie.
Supposedly he's the main character going forward.
I thought he would win the award for who Giamatti would play. He had a very devious Paul Giamatti type look to him.
He did.
Putting out those pamphlets. He's bad.
Yeah. And then the dialogue. I mean, there are scenes in this that felt like they belonged in a TV show. They were not scenes for a movie. It felt like it was, the next new show to hit CBS, and here's the dialogue between Sienna Miller and Sam Worthington to prove it. I don't know.
CBS, Terry. This is like USA or Hulu, maybe even. Like, that's not. CBS is overstating it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I like, Todd, I like how you kind of analyze the approach of what do you do with this and how do you do this. And I think as you were talking, the way I think that would have been the best way to approach this would be to go at it the MCU way. And what I mean by that is, like, phase 1 of the MCU, it established each character in its own movie and then brought them all together. That's what this needed to do. Have a movie about Kevin Costner. Have a movie about Luke Wilson. Have a movie about
He's like
Sam
70 years
Worthington.
old. He doesn't have time to do that.
I agree with that point.
I
agree with that point, Terry.
And have
that's a TV show, though. That's not a movie, though.
No, but it could, if it's good enough, it could
Decalogue style. Kieslowski style.
But he's like 70 years old. He's not going to do that. He's only made 4 movies.
And now he's making 4 chapters. He's doubling
12
his
hours
output.
is 12 hours.
70 years old, yeah. But there's so many plot holes throughout the movie. Each character, each plot line needed its own movie. And then have each movie end with them getting to Horizon, and then have your Horizon movie where all the characters meet, they intermingle, they do their thing at Horizon. That's what this needed to be. Because now I can't tell you who all these characters are because I don't know enough about all these characters. And because it's jumping around, like we don't see Kevin Costner for the first hour of the movie. And then after we leave the people that it spends the first hour on, we don't see him again for like another hour. It's ridiculous what they're trying, how many different things he's trying to all pull together. And I'm sure it's going to make sense when they all get together, but introduce your characters in a different way, and then we'll care a little bit more. But right now, it's just bing, 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 and I can't follow it. So I've got it at 2 stars with the reservation, kind of like you, to reevaluate after seeing the rest of it. But at the same time, the other problem I have with it is this movie cannot stand on its own, right? This movie is
The Fellowship of the Ring can't. That's what I'm saying. Like that movie was 3 hours of setting up, or like I said, walking to where the rest of the movie is going to happen.
But there's a resolution at the end of the movie.
There's no resolution. They're in a boat on their way to the movie, like at the end of the movie. Like
that's a little different. I feel like you're.
That's the same thing. It's just this isn't based on a book.
That is a fair point too, but you gotta. I don't know. I feel like you got to do something a little different and approach it a little different. That's why I'm saying give each one that's their own movie so you can establish these characters a little bit so we care about the characters. By the time we get to the whole story you want to tell, we're not even to the movie yet. Like you're saying, Lord of the Rings, it's 3 hours to get to the movie. We're halfway to the movie.
There was a movie that did that. It was the Legend of Buster Scruggs. Now, grant those were shorter movies, but like that was interesting. They all added up to something, and they weren't always related.
An anthology
this does separate it. This separates it into like it has like the San Pedro Valley part, then it has the Montana part, then it has the Kansas part. Like it does separate it. These are hour-long like things that are going on, and they're all intermingled in that hour. So I mean, that's sort of what you're talking about.
Why is it not a TV show then?
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It probably would best be served as a miniseries, but he is a cinema director and he wanted it on the big screen. I mean, I'm just saying, like, if it was going to be put on the big screen, I don't know how it was going to be done and make it successful, and especially betting 100% on the first one being big in order for the other ones to even happen.
Yeah, like I said, the MCU route. I think that's the best way to go. Establish each character in their own movie, and if they're done well enough, I mean. That's how you establish an episodic film series, right? Is that they've laid the blueprint on how to do it. You just got to care about the characters.
Exactly. That's the biggest. Quite honestly,
if you just make a basic Western about one of these things, it's not going to be like seen as something that is like a must see in the theater that is going to.
But if you know
create interest in all these other things,
that depends on who you're talking about, though. Maybe not the money men. Maybe the money men don't like it, but I think audiences would like. I didn't think any. My problem with the movie almost is the exact opposite of terror. I don't really care about the structural issues. I don't care that it doesn't have a resolution. I just thought the stories were lame. If they came up with better stories, I would be okay with the lack of resolution. I would want to know what happened next. I would be invested in seeing part 2. But get better stories, get better characters. There's nothing new in this movie that I haven't seen in a million other Westerns, with the exception of the Apaches, who only have 10 minutes of screen time in this movie. You're really telling me that Sam Worthington and Sienna Miller is interesting stuff? That stuff, that's like out of Little House on the Prairie. I mean, that was bad. That would have been passe in the 1960s. I mean, there's. I
don't know. The Apaches had more than 10 minutes. Like their parts were pretty good. I did like that was a section in the movie.
There was a section like what 45 minutes in, and they never revisit it.
I mean, there's only so much you can do in 3 hours.
Yeah, well, and that's the point. And I think what Zach's saying is he doesn't care, or none of the characters are interesting. Nothing that's going on. I feel like that's partially because we didn't have enough time to get to know them.
I like the British people on the train. They were kind of interesting. I could have lived with them a little longer. But again,
Luke Wilson as a cowboy is kind of awesome too.
Why are they even going? I thought of a funny joke. I thought maybe Luke Wilson was shooting a Verizon commercial, but he accidentally went onto the set of Horizon. That's why he's in the movie. Otherwise, I couldn't explain why he was in the movie. I mean, it made no sense. I don't know what those people were doing in the story except to make, I guess, good cutaways, which again is why I'm at 2 stars and maybe instead of 1.5. Like the movie kind of, in a weird way, even though it was incoherent, it flowed because it never got boring. And it was a relatively quick 3 hours, I gotta say, because it kept on cutting different parts. When the little girl gives the quilt to the Union soldiers, I just wanted to, I mean, really, that was just,
He's a sentimental boomer. That's what he does.
But I mean, there wasn't that shit in Dances with Wolves, though. Come on, Kevin Costner.
That was
and he is long-winded.
35 years ago.
Yeah, I know he was sharper back then, maybe like our president. But like, here's the thing. Like, just get more interesting characters, like the 2 British people. Okay, they were kind of cool. That was like, it was almost like a Mystery Train, Jim Jarmusch. You get these 2 tourists on the train, they're drinking all the drinking water. That's kind of interesting. I make a whole movie out of them. I don't care about Sienna Miller. I thought her storyline was terrible. I didn't understand the Kevin Costner storyline, and I don't know. It just, man, I wanted to see something more innovative, especially in this era where Westerns are doing some innovative shit. Clearly, Kevin Costner hasn't watched them. But he's a long-winded guy. His eulogy for Whitney Houston was 25 minutes, but that was a great 25 minutes. More than the Apaches got in this movie. Way more than Pete Conrad.
There you go. All right, well, we got to move on. I'm giving it 2. Zach's giving it 2. Todd's giving it 3.
It's an interesting movie to talk and think about. That's also why I'm at 2 instead of 1.5.